Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conrad, and this show is where we hear the real stories from real people changing the world. From everyday people to the top celebrities, all the conversations are real, raw, and always unscripted. Thank you for joining me today. Now let's get to today's guest. All right, everybody, welcome to Unscripted One-on-One and unique week this week. I'm doing something that kind of came up last minute, but I saw that Mount Vernon, thanks to COVID, is doing a virtual homecoming this year. So I had a few kind of in the bank already, just friends and alumni that I had already recorded. And so I reached out to some other people, and what an honor tonight, honestly, to have Coach Scott Flemming on. And I didn't get to play for Coach Flemming, and maybe we can get into, if you remember me being around the gym, because I was pretty much lived in that place while I was there. Actually, Coach Veal called it the house that I built when I was on a recruiting trip with my son. But so I spent a lot of time in the gym. But Coach, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your family, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I think my name is Scott Flemming. I was the coach at Mount Vernon in AD for 20 years. In fact, I've spent about a total of 26 years at MVNU. So it's almost half my life. So obviously we really love the school. And my wife, Sean, worked there for many years. We're both graduates of MVNU. You know, I was a student. I worked in the admissions office. I worked in the athletic department. And I was even a parent of a student there. And my son went there. So, you know, we have a lot invested in MVNU, and left there in 2010, and have had quite a journey since then. We've been a lot of places, and maybe we can get into that. Presently, I work for the NBA, and I'm the head coach and technical director of the NBA Academy in India. Unfortunately, like everything else, that was kind of shut down in March. So we're doing a lot of virtual things. I've become the Zoom master like everybody else, you know, doing a lot of Zoom sessions with our players and kind of keeping them accountable. And hopefully, you know, we'll get back together in the spring sometime or sooner.
And Coach, you took over. Remind me if I'm wrong. I believe Coach Blickian was my freshman year, so that would have been, not to age myself here, but I believe that would have been 89. Did you take over? I guess it would have been my sophomore year?
In 90. I think he finished 89, 90, and
Right.
then I came in the next year. And I do remember you being around the gym quite a bit. So we'll just get that out of the way.
Oh, good. Well, at least I left my mark. You know, I might not have been on the court, but well, I typically sat over by the weight room, by the bench during games. You know, like, I don't know, 90% of the team was my friends. So that was my circle of influence.
Well, and Coach Veal used to sit over there too, near the weight room. So,
That's right. That's right. Well, it's an honor and a privilege now to have my son play there. I mean, that's really special. And you said you had a son that went there, and you know, there's something special about that to have someone there, and to go back. You know, it's a great place. It really is, and it's an honor to be there. And I you know, like I said, I was close to the whole team. And you know, one thing I wanted to ask you, and this, not to go kind of dark right away, but you know, we all walked through Ronnie and Darren.
yeah.
And I believe that, didn't you have to, weren't you the one? And again, I hate to go to a very sad place, but you know, I just had so much honor and respect for you, in that I believe you were the one that actually had to go to the site. Was that right? Is that my history right?
I did. You know, that was that'll always, you know, be something I remember, not for good memories, but there were some that came out of it, but really tough days. I had to go identify them, you know, when they had been in the accident, and then I actually went with a policeman to tell their parents that they had passed. And to this day, I've told this story a few times. You know, when I went to Ronnie's parents, and Ronnie had a great family, and what a great young man. You know, I loved coaching him. Mm-hmm. And I looked in the window, and his parents were watching TV and just laughing, you know, out loud. And I thought, in 10 seconds, I'm going to tell them that their son's passed. And wow. So to this point in my life, and probably will always be the hardest thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Is to walk up to that door and to tell them that, you know, Ronnie had been in an accident. So, yeah. And then all that happened after that, there was a lot of healing and people coming together. And it was, of course, it was a great thing that the coaches in the conference actually decided they wanted to have a Ron Holmes Award for the best player in the conference every year.
Yep.
And that meant a lot to us. We had his family come in and they would present that at times. And so, and I even have some contact still with his sister, Joy.
Boy, yep.
She was a fabulous player at Purdue, the player of the decade there.
Yep.
And if people don't know, her son is Gary Harris, who
Right.
plays for the Denver Nuggets, starts for them. And so, I've sent her a lot of pictures of Ronnie, and we just don't talk a lot, but we've stayed in touch.
Yeah. Incredible family. Ronnie lived right next door to me my sophomore year. So I had Chris Maston as was my roommate for
Yep.
and then Ronnie and Darren were right next door in the old dorms. And then we had Shu and Bill Hines were next to them, and Van Fossen and Wells were next to them. So that was kind of our row. And my weekends were pretty boring because they were always all gone. But
Right.
Man, I love Ron and Darren. And there's and many people that know me, I've talked about him so many years since then. The fact that no greater impact, and I think you probably remember this, his funeral or his visitation, the line was out the door and around the
Right.
block. We were
Right.
2 hours late. My parents came down to take me because I was pretty distraught. That was really, really hard. And
Yeah.
my parents came down, we got lost, and we finally got there like 2 hours late, and the line was still out the door down around the block. Just an impact of what an incredible impact he was, and Darren as well. Like,
Yeah.
just love those guys. And I didn't mean to go to that place, but I know you were connected with them as well.
Yeah, and there are a lot of great memories. We always want to remember people before all that happened. And
Right.
I love Darren, and Ronnie was, he was somebody that really helped a new coach
Yep.
get adjusted. And he was the star of the team, he and Steve Gregory,
Mm-hmm.
and they accepted me with open arms after having a good experience with Bernie Bilikian and all that. And so that meant a lot to me. And that, I think that kind of set the scene for us to have a really good year that first year. And I always was indebted to them for that. And Ronnie was something special. He had me laughing so much of the time. And but he was a great player to coach.
And he loved everybody the same. Didn't matter who you were. He loved everybody the same.
Yeah, and I can remember him befriending, just kids that would come in the gym, and people that a lot of other people didn't give much time to, and Ronnie never met a stranger.
Nope.
Yeah.
And that taught me a life lesson, Coach. It really did. It really, really did. I learned a lot in his passing. I learned how you treat people. And I've taken that with me the rest of my life, and the same with Darren, both of them. But so let me ask you this, and I definitely want to get into where you are today and what you're doing. But let me ask you one more question. What was it like as a coach? How do you take a team in a moment like that and then find a rallying point? Like, how do you bring a team together as a coach? Because I coach a little bit myself, but I'm always intrigued by how coaches handle adversity, and that's the ultimate adversity right there, is to lose your star player in a tragic instant moment. How do you go from that to get your team back together and really become a family?
Well, it wasn't easy by any stretch, and we had our high points and we had some real low points, especially those that were close to Ronnie and Darren. We spent a lot of time praying.
Yeah.
And meeting together and just kind of talking through it. And every once in a while, we'd have to kind of talk through it again.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, even expectations changed on what kind of season we would have when you lose somebody like Ronnie, because we had lost Steve as well to graduation, and so we were just a different team. But I really admire those guys. I think we pulled through it. It wasn't always easy, but, you have to just let them grieve. And then at times you had to put it aside and say, hey, we got a game to play. Let's stick together. And a lot is they say many times, it can either destroy a team or it can bring a team together. And I think more so it brought us together. I won't say that, we had our moments where it was pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I'd say overall that group really came together.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a credit to your leadership, because, they're going to look to you as that almost a father figure in that moment. Like, none of us knew what to do. None of us had ever, I don't think most of us had never experience something like that, especially so quickly. And so, as a campus, we were hurting, but I can't
Yeah,
imagine a team. And,
yeah.
you did a great job. And
Well, I remember coming back from, when everybody kind of found out that it happened, and I came back to my house. We were living on Coshocton Avenue at that point, and I don't know if you were over there, but my house was just packed full of students, and we were all just kind of coming together to work our way through that thing. So yeah.
Yeah, we went over to Sugar Street because that's where those guys all lived.
Okay.
And we went to Sugar Street and anyway, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, but thank you for your leadership during that time.
Sure.
Because that, and especially you had to do so. I got honestly a little choked up when you were talking about going to his family's house.
Mhm.
I can't imagine what that's like, and that's
Hope I don't have to ever do it again.
right. Absolutely. So, well, let's move on to brighter days. And I do hope we see Ron and Darren again one day. I pray that we can see Ron and Darren again one day. But let's move on to brighter days. So you finish up at Mount Vernon, and then where did your journey take you to where you are today?
Yeah. So that last year I was in Mount Vernon, leading up to that, we as a family really felt like maybe there was another chapter. I had been there almost 20 years, and I had a great experience at Mount Vernon. Wouldn't trade it for anything. I loved my job. I didn't leave a job that I didn't like. It was something that I had to really work through. And we felt a call to get in a more secular situation. I had read the book Roaring Lambs. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it kind of opened that up. And just at the same time, our family just felt like this is maybe time for us to take all this preparation. And I feel like students at Mount Vernon are doing the same thing. It's a great place of preparation. Then you have to go out into the world. And it was my time again to do that. And while I was feeling that, I got a call from Donnie Nelson, who I had coached for 2 years at Wheaton College. And I had developed a close player-coach relationship with him. And here, some 20 years later, he called me and still called me coach. And at this time, he was now the general manager and president of the Dallas Mavericks. And so he said, "Hey, I bought a D League team. It's the G League now.
Yeah.
But said I want you to come out and help me to start this team and help coach this D League team." And I had been praying a lot before that and really thinking about what's next for us. And so I didn't answer him right away, but I felt really that this was something God brought into our life. I mean, this was the answer to what we had been looking for. And really, I would say this, that it was a bigger step for us, a faith step, to go to Dallas, Texas, than it was for us later to go to India.
Wow.
Because I felt like, I could have retired at Mount Vernon, and things were going well at the time. And I loved our staff and my players. I'd been recruiting other kids. But that was a big faith step, just to leave that security behind, to really going into a situation that wasn't that secure. There's a lot of turnover at that level. But we were there 2 years, and it was a good experience, a growing experience, going back to being an assistant coach. And then my second year there, I was actually with Del Harris. And if some people may know Del, he was Kobe's first coach with the Lakers, and I think is a Hall of Fame coach. He was the coach of the year in the NBA. But beyond that, he became a real mentor to me. He was a strong believer, is a strong believer, and is really one of my great friends now.
Wow.
But and it was interesting because they asked him to come out of retirement and to coach the Texas Legends. And he told Don, he said, the only way I'll do that is if I have Scott as my assistant, and if he coaches the road games and I coach the home games, because he just didn't want to go on the road anymore.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was great. I mean, I loved, and I thought I knew a lot of basketball up to that point, but I learned a lot from Del. He is he started in middle school and worked his all the way up to 35 years in the NBA. And so I was learning from him, but being able to go on the road and be the head coach of the team, that was a great experience for those 2 years. And so that was our first move. And that led to his whole next chapter, going to India. The NBA had called Del, and they had connections with the national team in India, and asked if he had anybody to recommend. And so he put my name forward and asked me if I'd mind if he'd recommend me. And I thought at the time, basketball in India, I never even knew they had basketball in India,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And but again, this was something that Sean and I prayed about, we talked about, and I had a good friend long ago say something that has stuck with me, and it was a big reason why I went to India. He said, you know, you ought to do what you do best and go where it's needed most.
Mm.
And that kind of stuck with me because India needed a lot of help with basketball
Mm.
at the national team level. And I also saw it as a chance to be kind of a tent making missionary. You know, they don't let missionaries into India, but this was a great platform to go in there and share what's more important to me than the basketball even. And that's pretty important.
Yeah, right.
So that's when, so that we took off for India, and I was there almost 3 years as the national coach. And it had its challenges. You know, India is not for everybody. It's not an easy place to live, but I have still to this day great relationship with those players that I coach in the national team, and many of I did a lot of coaching of coaches.
Mhm.
Did a lot of clinics there, and I worked with even the younger kids in some of the national camps. And so it was, I would do it all over again. I have no regrets with that. So, and now I'm back for my second stint in India. I had a short stint at NNU. I was coming to a close for different reasons, personally, and just with what was happening with the federation there, that I needed to look for another position. And that was another godsend that the job opened up at Northwest Nazarene University in Idaho. And long story short, I ended up applying for that and going and interviewed, and they offered me the position. And so I thought that I'd be there for years. I was going to build another program like I did at Mount Vernon. And 2 years into it, I was out fishing actually on the lake. I like to fish. I don't do it enough. And I got a call from the NBA saying, would you consider applying for the director of basketball operations in India? And I pretty much told them no. You know, I'd only been here a short time. I wasn't sure my wife wanted to go back there. I mean, I just didn't feel like this was the time. But the problem was I was out on that lake for another 6 hours, and God started speaking to me and just saying, you know, you at least need to be open and listen. And so I called my brother and I talked to him a while for some counsel. And then, you know, I thought if I go home and Sean says, no way, we're going back to India, that would be the end of it. But when I got home and I talked to her, she was really open to it, maybe more than I was at that point. And then I called all my kids and they were saying, Dad, you should do this. This is a great opportunity. So we went back to India I got the position. We went back to India for the second time. And so I've had two different positions. I started off at grassroots basketball, just helping to build infrastructure and just working a lot with youth and young coaches. And then this last year, I really missed being on the court and coaching. So I talked to them about, we had an opening, and so I became the head coach and technical director at the NBA Academy. And so that's what I've been doing over the last year and a half. And it's been really rewarding in a lot of ways. And I don't know what the future holds, but right now, that's what I'm doing virtually, like we're doing right now. I talk to my players and coaches and a lot of the people in New York and with the NBA, just trying to keep things rolling while we're not on the court.
What a unique time for all of that. And what I appreciate that you said in there is, you know, my belief has always been that you know, you got to be open, you got to be available.
Yeah.
If you do those two things, God's going to direct your paths, you know, and you've been both. I mean, and those are radical moves. Had you ever been to India before that opportunity?
No, not at all. We took the position, you know, sight unseen.
Wow.
It was definitely something we felt really at peace with, and that God wanted us to go there. And so you just have to go, you know.
Right.
And it was I mean, when I was there, the first year I was there, people would ask me what India was like, and the only way I could really tell them was every day you see something you've never seen before. And I mean, I would drive through the city going to practice. And this is in the middle of Delhi, which is a city of about 20 million people.
Yeah.
And on my left, I'd see an elephant coming by, and then here comes a camel, and you just can't make those things up. And besides people wall to wall, if you think of 20 million people, it was twice as big as New York City. So it was a unique experience. And then I got to travel all over India to rural areas and different cities, and so that was really enjoyable. And Sean got to go with me a lot of those places. And then we traveled quite a bit, even out of the country. Our national team, when I was there, we played in the Philippines and we played in China. And then even with the NBA, we've been to Hungary and Australia and different places that really, this is where basketball, I could say basketball has been really good to me, because it's allowed me to travel all over the world on somebody else's dime and be able to see these places that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So
that's all incredible. I mean, not a lot of elephants and camels in Mount Vernon.
No, I hadn't seen too many. And there are dogs in Mount Vernon, but not about 1 million of them that you see in Delhi. So
right.
stray dogs. So
I can't imagine packing up the family and moving to India, not Indiana. That'd be even weirder. But India, sight unseen, even that is incredible. How long did it take you to just adapt to the culture? Because I got to think the culture is completely different, right?
I'm still working on that, but I've been there almost 5 years now, and so Sean and I've talked. We can do India. It's not easy. It's not for everybody, but I think we've adapted, and there's some tough days. Processes take forever. And here's something I had to do. You can't compare it to home. My first month and a half, as much as I knew I couldn't do this, I kept thinking, well, it's not like this in the U.S. This is not like it was in Texas or Idaho or Ohio. But I think as soon as I quit doing that and just quit comparing it to the U.S. and embrace their culture, embrace where we were, things really got a lot better. So.
Yeah. Can you worship in India? I keep saying.
It's funny you keep saying that, because when I tell people I'm from India in the U.S. here, they always say, Indiana, we're in Indiana. I'm saying, no, this is India, like 8,000 miles away.
Right.
You really can't. Christianity is as a minority there. I mean, it's only 1 or 2% of people, and most of them are either Hindu, Sikh, or Muslim. And but there are some. We've been a part of some great churches, and we are still even. We've been worshiping with our church now on Zoom.
Yeah.
But we were a part of a church in Mumbai as well as Delhi. That they're a small group of committed Christians. I would say 85-90% are Indian people, and then there are a few outsiders like us that are part of the fellowship. But I have so much admiration for them, because there are so few Christians, and it's really not looked upon very positively by most people. But they have really made an impact, and they have changed our lives being in churches like that.
Now, you said you're able to share your faith. Is that dangerous where you are?
It can be. I'm really not supposed to do that. There are even laws or rules saying, as a Christian, you can't really openly share your faith. And I guess I've been a little deviant in that I do it more than I'm supposed to. But I also have to be careful. And even working for the NBA, I have to be careful there. But we've had our chances, and I think a lot of it is modeling what Christ has done in you. And then the questions come, and how can you be this way? One of the biggest things that has probably happened is how we treat people. And you talked about Ronnie, how he treats everyone. Well, in India, I'm a really oddball, because, there's still, the caste system is still, kind of alive and well in India. And how the lowly people, the people that are on the streets, or even the workers, like the janitors and the drivers and the cooks and those kind of people, are not treated very well by the haves. They're treated like the have-nots. And when I went into India and just started treating everyone equally, just because that's who I was, that's what my family taught, and that's what my faith has me do, it was really odd, and they saw something different in me. A lot of people would ask those questions, and I know I'm no different than probably you are, or many people would act while they're in India. But it's a really different thing. When I would, my driver, Arvind, became my best friend in India, and it went from being a driver to being just a great buddy. Rather than sitting in the back, I would sit up front, and we ended up taking him to church every Sunday. Sean and I did, and to the point where he made a commitment, a faith commitment. Wow. And
that's awesome.
We still have contact with him, and our cook Minu has become like a family member. Sean and Minu are really close to this day, and we've actually hired her again here in Delhi, and she doesn't work. She only comes about once a week, but we just wanted to keep commitment to her, and her family has become like family to us. And so those are the really great things about India.
Yeah, no, what an amazing story you guys have. I mean, really, to go from Mount Vernon to India. I got it right that time. I didn't say India.
You did.
So, all right, left field question, and one of the ground rules of Unscripted is if you can't answer the question or don't want to answer the question, you're free to say pass, because it is unscripted. We didn't change the script here. So unscripted left field question. And I'm even going to make it easier, because normally my thought was, tell me your favorite player you ever coached, but I'll make it easy, because I don't want to have to I don't want you to have to go back to some guys and be like, man, you were number 2. So give me what are the top 5 players that you've ever coached at any level, and why?
Yeah. Boy, that is a tough one. I could probably run off about 100 or more here. I've coached about 500 players now at this point.
Wow.
And so, if you're talking about Mount Vernon days, boy, that's tough. There were just so many, early on, especially, I told you about Ronnie and Steve, how they accepted me. And I, to this day, was so thankful for that. And Steve and I have stayed in contact. And in fact, I hired him as my assistant coach, and and then we hired him as the women's coach. So that was a great relationship with those two. And then, later on, there was Kenny Chafin. He was somebody that had a full ride to go to Western Michigan, and before he ever got there, turned him down and decided he wanted to come to Mount Vernon.
That's awesome.
And I was thankful for that. And there aren't many guys. I've had plenty of them that have gone to Division I schools and then decided they wanted to transfer. But Kenny made that decision, even with a full ride sitting in front of him, to go to Western Michigan, and came to Mount Vernon. He ended up being an All-American and helped us to win the national championship against Gardner Webb there, which was probably the greatest win we ever had. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
That was his senior year. And then I think of three players that all had gone to military schools, and at the time they wanted to be Division I players, but especially guys like Phil Argento and Ben Falkenberg, and so some of those guys that they wanted to be Division I players, so they went to these military schools and decided, I don't think I want to be a military man, and it's a lot harder than I thought. And so they came back, transferred, and that's why, in recruiting, and I'm sure Coach Veal or any of the coaches would say, you never want to burn bridges. When somebody decides to go somewhere else,
right?
You want them to think of you first when it doesn't work out. And so you wish them well and just say, hey, we're always here in case it doesn't work out. And so, we've had a lot of players. I think of Jason Hall, that came from Bowling Green.
Yep.
He was starting a lot of games his sophomore year at Bowling Green, and then it was really a spiritual thing for him that he decided he wanted to leave there, and he came to Mount Vernon, and that was our first team that went to the Nationals.
Yeah.
And he was an All-American, and to this day, again, I only coached him 1 year, but he made such an impact to get us really, we were trying to get there, and he was the guy that put us in there, and that was the first of 8 trips to the NAI Nationals. And so that was, I think of him, but man, there are so many more, Aaron, that I could think of. But those are a few along the way.
Well, that's an unfair question. Now that you've answered it, that was an unfair question, because 500. I mean, I've coached on a low level, obviously,
Yeah.
nowhere near where you have, but you always have your players, and they're all special. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
let me tell you about one. I'll jump way ahead to the Texas Legends, and you may know this name. I had Antonio Daniels.
Oh yeah, Bowling Green.
Yeah, on our team, and he was a third pick in the NBA draft. Had a long NBA career, and he had been injured, and he came down and played with the Texas Legends for the 2 years that I was there. And he at the time he wasn't a believer, but he was a leader, and he was willing to come down and be a mentor to these young players. Most of them were young players right out of college, and we had some really good talks. And since then, he's become a really strong believer.
That's awesome.
He was close to divorce. His family was breaking up, and they've reconciled. They're back together, and I just think the world of him. And he was a pretty good player too.
Yeah.
So that's one that sticks out to me as well.
My wife will love that story. She's a Bowling Green grad.
Okay.
And she shared a class with Antonio Daniels. So
Gotcha.
the one NBA player, when we're watching, now he's out of the NBA now, but when he would play and a game would be on, she'd hear Antonio Daniels, and that was her moment. She'd get all excited because she had a class with Antonio Daniels.
Well, he was a great player, played on some great teams, San Antonio. And then when I was there, he actually got called up twice. He was called up to, I think, the Washington Wizards and then maybe the 76ers. But, because he was a veteran guy, just had lost a step and was a little bit coming back from injuries. So.
Yeah. Columbus kid too, because I remember seeing him down at the
Sales High School, I believe. Yeah.
Great kid, and my wife will love that story because she thankfully she listens to all these. She may be the only person, but she listens to all my podcasts.
That was for her.
Thank you, Coach. Again, unscripted. We didn't even know that was going to happen. So, well, I could honestly talk basketball all night because there's a whole X's and O's I'd love to just sit down and go through with you. But you've been gracious enough with your time. I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. I'm so thankful that this was last minute. And I will tell you that over the years, we didn't know each other well, obviously, at Mount Vernon, but obviously all my best friends played for you. Aaron Reynolds is one of my best guys. All those guys are.
You should have dropped by my office. We could have been best buds if you had. Open office.
Philosophy. I might swing over to India. Maybe I'll swing over there.
Hey, anytime. You got a place to stay if you do.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind. But one thing I have done over the years, I never know how it happens, but we follow each other on Twitter. And I've always been just so respectful of what you put out on Twitter and how hard you work and how you promote what you do and all those things. There's a lot of bad on Twitter. There's a lot of garbage out there, but there's some people that I really, really respect so much. And you're one of those guys. And so when I put out an invitation and you say, yeah, absolutely, I'll come on, it blows me away. I'm so thankful that you would come on, especially on short notice.
Well, I'm an old guy that uses social media some because the NBA, the NBA wants me to. And so I put out a lot of NBA things, but then probably the other thing, just trying to throw out encouraging sayings or some things that I'm going through, and hopefully, it can be used for some positive too.
Yeah, well, Coach, you have, and honestly, I mean that. Those are the two places that I love seeing what you're doing in India because I'm fascinated by that because it's just such a culture shift, and I love the leadership stuff and just that encouragement that you have. And I'm so thankful for your time, and I don't want to revisit it again, but I do want to tell you that. You saw a basketball team and then those that were somewhat related to the basketball team like myself through a really hard season. And I give you a lot of credit for that. I know we've talked about it, but I want to mention it again. I always have had so much respect for you in light of that situation. So a question I have to ask, would you have picked up a kid that was an intramural champion to play for the team if he ever tried out? I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, we had a few of those, I mean, was my philosophy when I was at Mount Vernon. We would keep in fact, I think Mike Wells would probably fit into that category.
Absolutely. Wells and I were on the same intramural team. So, and I'm going to have him on tomorrow night. So,
okay. Well, you tell me, because, we had about 15 players on the team at Mount Vernon, and usually the last 3 were walk-on players. And my philosophy there was I didn't want 3 players begging for playing time and everything else. I wanted players that were going to bring something else to the team.
Yeah.
Whether it's an attitude or just being a cheerleader or being a leader or an act, somebody get the other guys, tutor them and academically or whatever. But, and I say that kind of kiddingly, but Mike Wells was our 14th, 15th man. And it came to the point where he wasn't going to play that next year. And you can ask him about this, but
all right.
I said, you're not going to play much. What do you think about being a student coach, with our team? And he wasn't really privy to the idea right away. He was just going to go into business.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Mount Vernon kid.
Yep.
And after a couple of days, he said, okay, I'll try it. Well, here we are about 30 years later, and he's been in the NBA about 25 years. He was with us, I think, about 3 years as an assistant. And I can remember, just challenging him to go on and move on. And he applied for all kinds of jobs.
Yes.
I won't take too much of his thunder away here,
Right.
but he ended up. We had talked about all the NBA teams, and he ended up going to Houston without any commitment, and he was basically working as an intern on the business side. And then 5 years later, he's telling Akeem Olajuwon how to shoot a hook shot. So,
the dream, right?
Yeah, and so how proud I am of him. And we brought Mike out to India 2 years ago. We have this Basketball Without Borders that the NBA has. So all the best players from Asia came in. And so we bring in about 4 NBA players and about 4 coaches. And I talked to New York about, hey, can we bring Mike? They all call him Wellesley. But can we bring Wellesley out here? And so he came out, and we had a great time together, and he did a fabulous job. And he's another guy. If you talk, he wasn't a great player, but I'm so proud of what he's done. And he's a great coach. Great coach.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to him tomorrow. It's been a minute since we talked. It's been a while.
Yeah.
We obviously keep in touch on social media, but as you say, Wellesley and I have some stories. A few of them may not be suitable for the podcast, but we had a lot of fun. And I'm, as you said, I'm proud of him. I'm proud of so many people from Mount Vernon that it's just special, and I can't explain it. To have my son be on that hill, on that same campus now is it's really special for me.
I tell people this, and I really, it's true. There aren't many days that I don't hear from a former player.
Yep.
One way or another, whether it's social media or a text message or a call or email. And a lot of them from Mount Vernon, but now it's grown to India and Idaho and Texas and all these places. And that's what, I'm as competitive as they come, and I love to win games, but I'll tell you, the reason I'm doing this is for that, and there's, it's a great thing to hear from these players and hear what they're doing and how proud I am of so many of them.
Yeah. Well, Coach, you've cast your shadow, even to a guy that sat not on your bench, but in close proximity. You cast your shadow when you were there. You continue to cast your shadow, even on some place like Twitter. I'm so thankful for your time, and I wish you the best. I'll continue to follow all of your travels and your journey as well. And thank you for your leadership, even to like me that never played for you. I really
well. Thanks for doing this. This is a great idea, and you do have an invitation to come to India. You have a place to stay. All right.
I'm gonna make it happen. Make it happen. And then you got to take me to all the right spots, because I know I'm probably getting
yeah, you like Indian food. It's pretty great, I'll tell you.
I'm not sure. So, well, Coach, thanks so much. Have a great night. Thanks for being a part of this, and God bless you and all you do.
Thanks, Aaron.
Absolutely.
All right.